Greetings, everyone. Dr. Anita Stewart McCafferty here with you. Welcome to Module 6 of EDU 679. I am so impressed that you are almost, you're at least 3/4 of the way through this course, and that's quite a feat. These accelerated online graduate courses are a lot of work, and for many of you, it may be your first time that you are taking an asynchronous online course, and it's a different type of teaching and it's a different type of learning. So I want to encourage you to stick with it. A couple of more weeks left. This week for Module 6, we are going to focus our observation skill set around aligning to the Marzano models. And so far, we've looked at the in-task standards, the 10 standards, which are kind of the national answer to what does good teaching look like. We've also used Marshall's rubric, the author of our common text. And so we've looked at his 6 categories. Then we focused some work around questioning. Then we've used Charlotte Danielson's model. And today this week, we're going to practice using Marzano's models. We're also going to shift our attention a little bit and look at supervision scenarios for school leaders and really think about this broader concept beyond just classroom instruction for supervision and evaluation, and think more broadly about what a school leader needs to be prepared for when you are thinking about supervision. So I have a number of scenarios that I'll talk to you a little bit more about that we're going to practice with during this week and also during Module 7. So our guiding questions for this week are the following 2. How do we align classroom observations to agreed upon standards of practice? And in this case, it's Marzano's. And then how does a school administrator effectively supervise and manage difficult situations with staff, students, and/or parents? Our 5 module objectives are as follows. Identify effective teacher moves from classroom instruction, align observational data from mini observations with the Marzano models, develop probing and reflective questions for use in feedback conferences with the teacher that you observed. Use an observation tool for collecting classroom data and guiding feedback conversations. And the 5th is to analyze supervision situations to determine appropriate courses of action for school leaders facing each of the dilemmas. This week, we'll turn back to our reading of Kim Marshall's Rethinking Supervision and Teacher Evaluation text, and you'll be asked to read chapters 7 and 8. And then the rest of the readings will really focus around Marzano's evaluation models. So he has a teacher evaluation model that's been around the better part of the last decade. And then a couple years back, there's an updated, what he refers to as the focused teacher evaluation model, which is trimmed down, slimmed down, and it has as its focus standards-based classroom teaching. And so you'll have the opportunity to dive into those 2 models from Marzano, and then choose one of the models, or certainly you could choose both to give it a go for our classroom video observation assignment this week, where you're going to choose one of those videos, watch it after you have examined the Marzano frameworks, choose one of the observation tools to use, and align what you're seeing to Marzano's frameworks or his models. And then your discussion board activity for this week is focused around supervision dilemmas. So I'm going to share my screen with you because I want to take a few moments to walk you through the Marzano frameworks so that you're familiar with those frameworks and have the opportunity to play around, to become more familiar. I know Marzano may be a model that many of you are already familiar with. It's a very common one here in the state of Maine and across the Northeast. And so it really depends on where your school and district are located and kind of, you know, what your district leaders and board members might have been familiar with for frameworks. So let's go ahead and look at this Marzano framework. And I'm going to take you through kind of the original version first. It's the one from, you know, 2012 time period, somewhere around there. And it may look familiar. I'm sure many of you have read The Art and Science of Teaching, and this framework is often referred to as the Art and Science of Teaching framework. And so the way that Marzano has built his model is it focuses on 4 different domains, and those domains, domain 1 is classroom strategies and behaviors, domain 2 is planning and preparing, domain 3 is reflecting on teaching, and domain 4 is collegiality and professionalism. Now, when you further sort of break apart this framework or this model, you'll see that it's really centered around 10 design questions. And you'll see those indicated as DQ for design questions. And so the first design question that you're going to see is under a category in domain 1 called lesson segments involving routine events. So design question 1 looks at communicating learning goals and feedback, and you'll see 3 different elements there. Then design question 6 is around establishing rules and procedures. And so it's part of what you see on the screen is this green set of elements that are focused on lesson segments that involve routine events. Now, what you'll maybe come to know or have known from experience is that much of the classroom observation work gets aligned back in Marzano's framework to domain 1. Domain 1 tends to be the areas that most people would focus upon, and because there are 41 elements, and many of these elements, all of these elements probably, you can observe when you observe classroom instruction. So they're kind of the easiest, if you will, to be able to align your work to. So the green ones off to the left are the lesson segments involving routine events. Then in the middle, in the purple, you'll see lesson segments that address content. And there are 3 design questions that fall under that larger category in domain 1. And those are design question 2, which is about helping students interact with new knowledge. Then design question 3 are for those times in your unit where you're helping students practice and deepen the new knowledge. So they've already been introduced to the new knowledge, so they've acquired it and they've already interacted with new knowledge in design question 2. Then you would use the elements under design question 3 when students are practicing and deepening their knowledge. Then design question 4 is more infrequently observed because it's the times when you're helping students generate and test hypotheses. So they've already been introduced to the content, they have practiced and deepened their knowledge, and this is where then they're moving forward and being able to, you know, you're organizing students for cognitive complex tasks or you're engaging them in hypothesis generation and testing and providing resources and guidance. Then to the right, all the way to the right in kind of this maroonish brown color are the lesson segments that you're enacting on the spot. So design question 5 is engaging students, and there are a number of elements there. Design question 7 is recognizing adherence to rules and procedures. So kind of that idea of with itness and, you know, consequences and what are the rules and procedures. Design question 8 is establishing and maintaining effective relationships with students. So this is this teacher-student relationship portion. And then design question 9 is communicating high expectations for all students. So Those 9 design questions that fall under domain 1, classroom strategies and behaviors, are really the focus for many people when they're doing classroom observations, if you're aligning it to this Marzano model. Domain question 2, planning and preparing, you're often going to observe those elements more like in professional learning community time or during structured professional development or professional learning time. Then domain 3 are those elements where the teacher is reflecting on their teaching practice in order to improve. So being able to think about their strengths and areas of weakness, and thinking about how are they evaluating their own effectiveness and how can they develop plans to be able to grow and monitor their progress towards growth. That final domain is collegiality and professionalism, and it has a number of elements there where you're really thinking about how do you promote positive interactions with colleagues, with students, with parents. Do you seek mentorship for areas of need or interest? Are you mentoring other teachers, sharing ideas and strategies? And are you adhering to district and school rules and procedures, as well as helping to participate in district and school initiatives? So those 4 domains are part of that original Marzano model, teacher evaluation model, that really is based on the art and science of teaching. So that's that framework. Now, in this framework, the rubrics that he uses, forgive the scrolling, it will be over soon here. I just want to show you, maybe I'll move to this next one here, these domains and scales, and I think it will show you that a little bit clearer. So for instance, design question 1, what will I do to establish and communicate learning goals, track student progress, and celebrate success? Here's an example in this rubric, scales, rubrics, evidence document that I've also aligned to or attached to the assignment, where you can see the scale that Marzano uses, and it's a 5-point scale. So it's the highest rating is innovating, which is a really difficult level to attain, honestly. And it moves down to applying, developing, beginning, and not using. So there are reflection questions for each of those domains. So that in this document, if you want to delve in deeper to say, oh, well, what does that element mean, or what's that design question look like in the classroom? There's teacher evidence of it in place, little check mark boxes here, and then student evidence, and then a rating or a scale for each of those elements. Now, one of the things to know is that in this evaluation model as a whole, there are 61 elements, 4 domains, 10 design questions, 61 elements that you're looking at. And even if you just focus on domain 1, classroom strategies and behaviors, there are 41 elements, and there are scales and evidences for each of those elements. So it is a very detailed, very specific model. One of the ways that people often think about the Marzano model being used, if they're familiar at all with it, is through the tool iObservation, which some districts, many districts, have bought into. And actually for Charlotte Danielson's model, her framework as well, there's an iObservation component. And that iObservation component is the online observation tool, where they'll have trainings and tools, a way for teachers to set goals, to be able to watch videos that showcase each of these elements in action. It's also a way for administrators and other colleagues to go in and give specific feedback, either formative or evaluative, more on the summative side of things, about each of the elements of the lessons observed. But what I do want you to understand is that iObservation is only one way that you could use the Marzano framework. you can still use the Marzano framework, which would then be your school and district's answer to what does good teaching look like, without using eye observation or another electronic tool set or learning management system. So in this assignment, I've included a number of observation tools, a snapshot form that you could use. So that's, you know, that would be different than eye observation, a next step rubric that you could use, and you could use the praise, probe, and polish. You could use the impact, the content alignment strategies impact form. You could use a questioning format, you know, and still align it to the Marzano framework. So I just wanted to clear that up, because sometimes people think that eye observation and Marzano model are combined, and they might be in your district, but they certainly don't have to be. All right, let's do one more look, and let's look at the newer model, this focused evaluation model. And in this focused teacher evaluation model, they've narrowed it down, thus the focus, to 23 essential behaviors to measure teacher effectiveness. And they have 4 areas or 4 domains of expertise. And as I mentioned before, these are all based around standards-based classroom with rigor. So the first one that you're going to see there is in this dark blue, standards-based planning. And you can see the essential behaviors that they have associated with that. From the standards-based planning, you're really focused on 2 pieces: the conditions for learning, so establishing those conditions for learning, and you can see the bullets there. Those are those essential teacher behaviors that this model calls out and has you really thinking about, looking for, and refining in your own practice. In the yellow is the standards-based instruction. And so those bullets look at the essential teacher behaviors, teaching behaviors that you want to be developing. And then the light blue box that goes across the bottom are the professional responsibilities, and you'll see the 3 essential teaching behaviors there, or so elements for those 4 domains. I then just want to briefly show you what it looks like if you're following this protocol. Here's an example of a tool that you could use with this focused Marzano evaluation model, where you're looking at what the focused statement is, the desired effect. So in this case, the example is previewing new content. And so then they have examples of teacher instructional techniques. So as you saw any of those happening, you could check, you could write little notes beside it. If there is something that's not mentioned here, but you observed it and it was under a teacher instructional technique, you could add it to the side. And then example of teacher techniques for monitoring for learning, example of student evidence of the desired effect, and then examples of adaptations that a teacher could make as they're monitoring student evidence and determining how many students demonstrate the desired learning. So this is an example of the evidences that would be connected with previewing new content in this focused model. So many schools and districts are still using the older original model based on arts and science of teaching. But then we're starting to see a shift over the last couple of years of districts who have been using Marzano's work to focus in, or to start using this focused evaluation model, because it really helps us streamline and really focus on standards-based instruction and learning. It still is using a scale which is similar. You'll see innovating is all the way over this 5 performance levels, with innovating, applying, developing, beginning, and not using that strategy. So if we come back to our assignment, you'll notice that I have included for you a snapshot form. And when we open this snapshot form up, what I've done in this form, and I've adapted it, is to say, okay, what are the questions, those design questions that we might see happening? And I want to remind you that it would be unlikely in the lesson segments that address content that you would see evidence in any given lesson of all three, where teachers are helping students interact with new knowledge, they're helping them practice and deepen, and they're helping them generate and test hypotheses about new knowledge. Now, there could be the rare lesson where you would see all three of those, but sometimes you're just going to have a not applicable for two of the three questions in that segment. Okay, so this is a place, just an organized way to take notes based on that framework. If we pop back over to the assignment, another version of it is this next step rubric. Similar, some of you tried this out for the Danielson framework. And this is sort of what I'm calling a praise, probe, and polish format. It's really this next step rubric where you're looking at the design questions are the criteria going down the middle. And then there's space to the left where you want to note areas of note. So effective moves that you're seeing, this kind of concept of praise. And then to the right, anything that you might have for suggestions or clarifying questions or probes or polishes or resources or ideas that you have that to share with the teacher as you're noting those down. So those would go to your right. And so you kind of see this is based on domain 1. So I took those 9 design questions from domain 1 and created this observation tool. Then the other thing that's attached to that assignment is that scales, rubrics, and evidences document that I had pulled up just to show you about those 23 elements that or the focus as well. So for the assignment, you're going to practice using one of the videos that you've not had the opportunity to practice with yet. It's a great idea to move out of your content area, out of your grade level, out of even your grade span, because when you do so, I gave this feedback to some of you in the past module assignments, that it helps to move your thinking, change your thinking a little bit, and for you to be able to go, oh, okay, how could I modify that strategy or that idea that I saw this kindergarten teacher using to my middle school classroom? Or how could I adapt this technique that I saw in this 4th grade classroom to my 11th grade, social studies classroom, for instance? Or I observed something in a special education classroom and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I really need to think about how I could modify or adapt or use that technique in my regular ed classroom as well. So that's the idea there, is really thinking, thinking through those things. And there are some of those videos that are not my favorite types of teaching. It's just not. We all have our biases, our perspectives, our approaches, and it's easy for us to get locked into this is the way to teach. This is the way to plan. And so it's good to keep the questions really focused on how is this impacting student learning? Not like, do I like it? Does it resonate with me? Because we're not trying to clone ourselves in others, although it's tempting. It's often tempting. All right, let's look one at the last piece, and this is this idea of supervision scenarios. So I'm going to pull up some of these scenarios, and you're going to be asked in the discussion board to think about, okay, what would you do? What are some of the actions that you would take as a school leader? What additional information would you seek as part of the process of resolving the situation or dealing with the situation? What questions do you have about how to handle the situation? So this is an opportunity really for you to take everything that you know about not only instructional practice, so instructional leadership, but what you know about school law, about special ed law for school leaders, what you know about organizational climate and culture and behavior, what you know about leadership, all curriculum, you name it, all assessment, all of those pieces, and bring it together to be able to see how those things bear witness to legitimate dilemmas. So the scenarios that you see that I provided for you this week are all scenarios that are based on my own experiences as an administrator. And so I've changed content areas, of course, you know, gender, key components. And I'm just asking for you not to try to figure out, you know, like, oh, 15 years ago, who was this person, or 10 years ago, or, you know, 8 years ago. That's not the goal here. The goal is really to think about the scenarios, because the scenarios that I've included are scenarios that not only have I faced, but I know numerous school leaders have faced as well. And this is not the end all be all. Like, this is it for scenarios that you might face as a school leader, but it's a good start. It's a good start to get you thinking about, okay, how do you handle this situation in real time? Because time, as we know, is often not our friend. And so when are the times that you need to act immediately and there is no room? You have to be what Schoen talks about, having reflected a lot on action so that you can reflect in action in the moment and you're with it, right? That with itness. Other times, how can you slow our tendency to just act, move, solve the problem, solve the issue, move on to the next fire, the next concern, the next dilemma? So how can we maybe slow that process down and make sure that we don't jump to conclusions, that we've looked at it from many different perspectives, and that we don't have a tunnel vision. So this is an opportunity for you to kind of, play with these scenarios. What would you do as a supervisor? What are your instincts? And then I'll share what I've done. At the end of the next couple of weeks, I'll share how I handled those situations. And I can assure you that when I've reflected on how I handled the situations, what I know now, I would do it differently in many cases. Not that it was awful then, although some cases it wasn't pretty, but right? Like, we learn and we grow, we know more, and we would be able to, hopefully, the goal is that we've always upped our game. We always make sure that we're thinking in widening our vision, our perspective, taking it in, reflecting. And the more that you do that through reflection and dialogue, the stronger your action will be able to be when you face certain situations. So it's an opportunity for you to dialogue in the discussion board around these scenarios. I wish you a wonderful week of learning. Stick with it. I know that you can do this, and I appreciate your insightful, reflective discussion board posts. The way that you're interacting with your colleagues makes my heart, feel warm and happy, because I know that it's furthering your learning. So I appreciate that. And your assignments have been absolutely fantastic. So thank you for that as well. All right, bye.